Welcome back, and thank you for tuning in to the Legacy Business Show. This program segment will showcase a Belizean entrepreneur making significant waves in the Belizean economy each week. These are forward-thinking individuals who are pushing boundaries and breaking barriers. This week, we continue seeing the fruits of the orange economy, where the Belize film industry is making waves. Last week, we spoke to Audrey Wallace about her challenges in the media. This week, Suzette Zaiden goes a bit deeper and talks about a new industry in Belize, the film industry. Suzette Zaiden is a Belizean film and TV producer recognized internationally as a passionate advocate for promoting Belizean, Caribbean, and Central American cinema via her brainchild, the Belize International Film Festival. So, Suzette, thank you so much for joining us here on Legacy Markets.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Can you tell us a bit more about your work in TV and film in Belize?
I started when I was about, in 1990, when I was about 18 years old, as an intern at Great Belize Productions. That was the parent company for Channel 5. The television station had not started yet. And so I got, it was kind of my summer before going off to study. And so I began working. I got fascinated with the idea of television. I was going to go do a journalism degree. And I did this internship, and I thought it looked a lot more exciting. Back then, the idea of journalism was you're going to go sit in a room and write, and you wouldn't see much people. It would be kind of maybe boring. Exciting on content on the paper, but not as exciting socially, I guess. And then during that year, I was also able to witness a foreign film production in Belize while I was doing that internship. And I thought it was huge. It was huge. It was like 30 people working on 16 seconds of a 30-second commercial. And I was like, wow, what kind of thing is this that so many people could be working? They clearly had higher budgets than what was being used in Belize at the time. And I was fascinated that there was a Mexican crew, and I was fascinated that they had come to Belize to shoot. And I wondered, what is it about Belize that is attracting them? And so throughout the years, I pursued that. I changed completely from journalism, and I started pursuing television first and then film, just to see what it was all about.
Wow, so it is currently 2023 going into 2024. You've been in this industry since 1990. I am not going to do the math, but I will say you're very experienced, obviously, within this industry. I know that you've been super busy with films, but can you tell us a bit more about some of the projects that you've completed in Belize or any new concepts?
Okay, I spent most of the early years was working in what most people do here in TV and video production houses. I did commercials. I did ads for products, for services, for the banks, for the financial services. I did ads for government departments. I did a lot of stuff with human services, community rehab. Saw a lot of social issues. And then I did a lot of work for the environmental community. So I was able to travel this entire country, film it from underwater aerials before drones. So we would rent a plane and take off the door, and that's how we shot aerials back then, and by land. So I was very lucky to have been able to participate in a lot of projects during my time before I actually branched out and started looking at film properly. And then I worked in broadcast TV as well. So I was part of the crew behind that would do the technical production of the news in the early days. And then I also worked with Crime Television, setting them up. And I was the head of production over at Bel Carib for a while. But then I went on, and I felt like, there was something missing. I still had not seen that one time back in 1990 when I saw this big production come. And I was like, where is this? Where is this type of production? This very potentially lucrative type of production? Because a person working in the media or in the video production in Belize, they would know that the budgets are not that high, and you're also expected to kind of do everything. You are expected to be the writer, the director, the producer, the camera person, the editor. And then I had this memory of a production where there was a camera person, there was there was like 2 assistant camera person, there was a producer, there were assistant production coordinators, there was a whole food section. You know, it was like, wow, this is different, this is big. And so I finally found somewhere that I could go and study film production, and that was in Cuba. And I did that for 2 years. And I was lucky enough to go to this school where they were explaining to us that our objective was to return to our country and proceed to either strengthen the film industry or create one where it didn't exist. And in Belize, at that time, the film industry per se did not exist. And so it has been pretty much my goal for about since like 2001 to try and get that started.
So is there anything that Belizeans can be excited to hear about the film industry next year in 2024? Do you have any projects that are ongoing?
That's
give us some information here.
Okay, so basically what we started to notice when we started to push for the film industry was that studio films, back then studio films were a thing, and those would be the big budget films, but they would come like once every like 7 years. And so people did not really pay any attention to an industry that, you know, brings about $1 million, but once every 7 years. And so there was the film commission that was put in place to try and attract more films. And so I worked there for a while. I'm not there anymore, but what we had noticed then was that what was coming were small productions. They would come like for 2 weeks, less than 30 days. But they would come, they would do survival type shows, they would do stuff like a lot of National Geographic, because, you know, Belize has such wonderful environmental assets. But the creative work was not, like the fiction, the feature film was not quite there. It's not very common. But I would say in the last 2 years, I'm sorry, there were some feature films back then, but they were very low budget. Maybe what you would call B films.
Okay.
And but they were being done. The budget was low, but it was a good training. It was a good opportunity for Belizeans to train, because when the budget is small, they're not as fussy about the skill levels that they are able to use. And so it was an opportunity for quite a few Belizeans to get their hands or their feet wet, so to speak. So now what happened is, this is an industry where relationships matter, where networks are made. You come once and you work with somebody, you will probably come back and call that same person again. And you build, that's how you build your network, right? And so what happened is, about 2 years ago, one of these producers from the B film era had gone on and also improved his conditions. And so he called me one day and he says, I'd like to do a film in Placencia. What do I do? I said, well, let's get started. And so I would say last year, we filmed a feature film for Hallmark called Caribbean Summer in Placencia. That's his company. His company, what they do, they're like a broker. So there are lots of these companies out there where the networks would call them and say, listen, we need some movies of the week. We need about 5 movies of the week. And so what they do is they pretty much produce it, and they will produce in Belize, they will produce in Mexico, they'll produce in the Philippines, they'll produce anywhere. So you want to keep these people on your radar, because then if you treat them nice and you give them proper incentives, they will come back. But we were lucky enough, there are no incentives in place for any foreign productions right now. We were just lucky that this was someone who had been to Belize and knew, okay, you guys are flight 2 hours away. I noticed you start putting in direct flights from Canada. We can rent stuff, we can bring it. You're gonna make it easy, you know, if your immigration and your customs are on board, it's gonna be smooth, you know. That's what they're looking for. So, you know, they balance it. Yes, we would like incentives, but if you can make it smooth enough and not be problematic, we will also come.
Yeah, based from my understanding, I know Belize, we don't have film rights right now, do we? Do we have film rights?
The film rights has nothing to do with that production.
Okay.
And film rights are a different. It's like, are you talking about copyright?
You mentioned incentives. So,
Fiscal incentives.
okay.
Yeah, that would be. Some countries offer a rebate. Like they would say, if you're going to spend $1 million in the country, but their budget might be $3 million. But if you can guarantee me, it could be whatever figure we decide. It could be 500,000 US, or it could be 1 million US. If you can show me that you've spent 1 million, then we will give you a rebate. A rebate of 10%, 20%. Some countries go as far as 40%. And the government would have to decide, well, that's 60%, that's like 600, let's go with 1 million. That's like 600,000 money spent that would not have been spent. I don't mind giving back 40%, but then it's a little bit tricky because the accounting would have to be in place. The proof, the burden of proof, they don't get it right away. They would have to submit accounting and checks and stuff. But the beauty of fiscal incentives is then the country, us, would be able to call the shots on certain things.
Yeah, and besides calling the shots, it also gives Belizeans the chance to experience a sense of pride while seeing our country in movies.
Yeah, and no, but by calling the shots, I meant that they would have to say, you can only get this incentive if you are maybe doing a film that showcases so much, right? They can ask for certain things. In return for this, we want a very positive film. Or we don't do, horror is a genre that's out there. Not every tourist board likes the idea of using the country for horror.
Correct.
However, you have to decide if this is going to be a money-making venture. You have to just accept it's just a genre.
Okay, so besides budgeting and let's say a genre of horror or terror being filmed in our country, Belize, what other setbacks have you experienced or faced within the film industry?
Well, those aren't even really setbacks because there's no fiscal incentives and so everything's fair game. The setbacks are the fact that we have never put a film law in place.
Okay.
There is no legislation that says Belize believes in film, and so let me give you a fiscal incentive and you can now go over to Beltrade and find it right there amongst all the other incentives. There is nothing. And at one point we had spoken to Beltrade many years back, and Beltrade had mentioned, and we had passed on this message, is unless you can show me a legal document, I cannot officially put you down in the list of incentives. And so we had been lobbying back then for years to put together a film law, get the legislation passed, actually recognize the Film Commission. The Film Commission isn't even recognized legally. It's just there.
Oh, wow.
And so nothing is, there's the Broadcasting Authority, there's such and such commission, but it's like a joke. Come on, guys, we're talking orange economy. Mm-hmm. We have to get serious. We have to, in order to proceed, besides the fact that the law isn't there, it means that agreements are not official. Agreements between, let's say, even with customs and immigration, they're like handshake agreements. Mm-hmm. And so it causes a lot of stress because we do something called kind of like equipment waiver when films are coming in. Like we allow, it's kind of between customs and stuff. If a film company is coming in, they can come in provided they have like a memo saying that a memo from finance saying that we know that this film is coming in. However, it's not really unofficial. It's not really a temporary pass. It's not the official temporary pass. And so you run into problems depending on which immigration official is at the border.
So what you're basically saying is there's no real protocol.
There's no real protocol that I can go to and say, here it is in the law, or here it is here. It depends on who's at the desk and who do you know. And it's messy. It's messy. It should not be like that. It should just be smooth. Okay,
so what do we need to do to make sure that transition is smooth or that process is smooth between the next 5 to 10 years? What can we do, or what do you recommend?
Well, we need to get the legislation passed. We need to do discussions between the between those who are actually working on the ground and those who pass legislation. Because the film industry, that is the part that makes the money, that would make the film industry look appealing to the legislators, the international productions that come here and film. Because these companies that come into this country bring money to spend. They're not taking any money out. They're just bringing money. They're just injecting capital in because they're coming here just to make the film and go back. And then you also have the local creatives. So we also, within that law, has to take into effect that there are people like Colorblind. There are other production companies. I have my own production company for the lands as well. And we are creating local content. So the legislation cannot only be looking at incentives for the foreigners that are coming to shoot here. It also has to look at incentives for the local people to make stuff. And then there's the issue of copyright. That's a whole another question if you want me to go there.
Well, unfortunately, we are running out of time, Ms. Suzette, but thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you so much for your contributions to the film industry and the orange economy.